Hello everyone, this is Rick Marsh, the Director of the Industrial Energy Efficiency Network. Thank you for participating in today's webcast. This topic that we're covering today has been raised in the feedback from some of the quarterly meetings that we've had recently, and I appreciate Bill Masaker and Van Young from Advantage Industrial Automation for recognizing the need and volunteering to fill it with this webcast. So thanks to the Advantage Industrial Automation team for supporting the logistics of this webcast, and also to Ali Shalki and the Integrate team for providing the comment. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our presenter, Ali Shalki, and let you take it away.
So thanks, Rick. This is such a great topic for manufacturing. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm with Integrate. My experience is in leveraging manufacturing systems for driving operational excellence. My work has spanned many industries, and my energy and water management has certainly been an area of focus for me. We'll work our way through this agenda over the next 40-45 minutes. This presentation primarily addresses two core components to energy management in manufacturing. The first part, we will look at the operational approach and best practices. Our focus is primarily around data-driven process changes and the best practices around that for reducing the waste in energy and water. The second part, we will be examining energy management systems. So I'm not going to spend much time on this slide, but I just want to make sure that we're all clear on the business drivers here. In today's marketplace, obviously manufacturers are faced with a multitude of energy-related pressures requiring improved energy usage. So from cost-cutting measures to not only the rise in energy prices, but also the volatility, which makes it hard to manage. And then the pressures on corporate social responsibility and how that's influencing the green image and brand recognition and the loyalty of customers. And then on top of that, we have the evolving emission regulations and carbon trade protocols. So at the end of the day, energy and water performance improvements really have direct impact on the bottom line of the organization, and manufacturers have realized the impact of that on their profitability. So again, just before we get started here, I want to make sure that the scope is clear to all of us. And the scope, when we say energy, we really mean wages. This term is, it's encompassing of water, air, gas, electricity, and steam. But we also say wages plus plus. And what I mean by that is that we are concerned with all purchased energy in all its forms, all purchased utilities in manufacturing facility, generated energy, generated utilities. And we also include water and sewage and greenhouse gas emissions in this kind of discussion. So the topic is applicable to all these things, and it's comprehensive and over-encompassing all those. Okay, so objectives at a high level, they seem clear and simple for everybody. Most of the times, we are interested in managing the usage to reduce consumption levels, managing the supply so we pay less for the next unit of energy consumed, and comply with emission regulations and reducing carbon footprint. Achieving those objectives is typically challenging, though. Why? Well, here are some of the challenges. Energy is still treated in most of manufacturing facilities as an overhead cost. Factors impacting consumption are not visible. The relationships between those external factors and the energy consumption are not very well understood, and so on and so forth. The notion that overall plant energy by itself is good enough to manage and understand those things and manage the energy is really not true. Knowing how the energy was used needs to be understood at the detail level and high granularity level to be able to influence the consumptions and manage it in a better way. Therefore, tools and methods and more information are required. Okay, so let's talk about the methods to do that. And I'm going to go back here and refer to classic challenges which all manufacturers deal with on a day-to-day basis. We deal with improving cycle time, productivity, material waste, scrap quality, etc., etc. Those are standard KPIs in manufacturing that are typically improved through continuous improvement cycles. In fact, progressive manufacturers establish total quality and lean type initiatives and programs such as Six Sigma and World Class Manufacturing, WCM, to drive their production operations for excellence. It is really about identifying the waste and reducing it, whether that is a material, a form of energy, etc. So how is that different when we apply it to line efficiencies and material waste? How is that different from energy itself? The answer is that it's not really different. Energy just seems different because, one, it's typically viewed separately from production operations and out of the production context. It's one of those things that's kind of, in a lot of places, limited to inside the walls of the powerhouse. Two, it's not as visible, such as a rejected product or a downtime on a piece of equipment on a line. So in fact, it's almost like any raw material usage where production operation need to track it and report against it by batch, by production run, or work order. So successful energy management cannot be in isolation of production operations and production context. And just some food for thought here, is energy on your bill of material yet? And this is really a paradigm shift that a lot of manufacturers are starting to look into. If I want to make a batch of product, I need X amount of ingredients to be fed to my process, and I also need X amount of kilowatt hours or another form of energy to make that product. So building practical sustainability programs has really two essential arms, the technical side and the operational side. The technical covers all the audits type of work, infrastructure, technology, capital projects for heat recovery, efficient equipment, internal generation, etc. The operational side covers the policies, procedures, operational work processes, roles and responsibilities, communications, etc. And it's really about modifying and influencing the right behaviors on the shop floors. Typically, that operational side winds up in the too hard basket. So you're going to hear that a lot. I hear it a lot. We have a monitoring and tracking tool. We're good to go. And this is clearly incorrect. The way we view practical sustainability, it's managing energy in a balanced and holistic approach, covering 4 cornerstones. Number one is the business. That's where the energy policy is defined and set with commitment from senior management for the resources and the funding, and based on strategic business priorities. 2, the people, and that's where the awareness is developed and the roles and responsibilities are defined, associated with predefined KPIs, key performance indicators, to drive the performance and evaluating such performance in a measurable fashion, so that everybody is graded according to how much they were able to achieve. And then 3 is the process, and that's where the people are given defined standard work processes about how to manage energy in the form of standard operating procedures as part of their roles and responsibilities to drive the daily operation in a systematic and standard way. And then finally, technology, which is really the enabler for all of the above, to enable such processes and be tools in the hands of the people. So we can see here that energy management is not something that you can just pass on to the powerhouse engineer, which we see a lot of times, or any single individual really. It's actually inclusive of the whole organization and at multiple levels inside the organization. The energy maturity model is a concept that's that the capability of an organization in managing their energy can or should be assessed across 4 vectors. And those are the 4 cornerstones we talked about. business, process, people, and technology. Each of the vectors is assessed separately, and practical sustainability requires progressing the maturity level of the organization in a balanced way. So in other words, if you look at the diagram that you have here, and you can see that there is multiple levels of maturity. Here they are called stage 0 to stage 4, and they're given certain definitions. There are different maturity levels out there that are available to you to look at. But the essence of this is that you really got to drive across all vectors in a balanced way, like we were talking. So the example that's shown in red on this slide, where and I'm going to try to point with my mouse here if I can get it moving. You can see that right there on the process vector, this particular case, it's lagging on process. It's very advanced on technology. That in itself, from experience, not following best practice, and it's not necessarily going to be successful, and really leveraging the investment in the technology. What needs to happen here is to focus more on the process, get that defined, drive the people vector as well, so that you're driving all of the across all the vectors in a balanced and bringing them all to the same level of maturity, and then progress from there onwards. So how do we go about developing such processes, and how do we go about implementing practical sustainability programs? For doing so, we always advise you got to examine and leverage industry standards, and there's a number of them out there. And the most recent, which came out in 2011 last year, and in fact is gaining significant amount of adoption in the marketplace at this point. And also it's an international standard, so it works well for companies that are across multiple continents, across countries. Is the ISO 50001. This is a standard that's intended to enable organizations to establish systems and processes for driving energy improvements and entrenching that in the day-to-day activities. It actually provides an excellent framework for defining and building a practical sustainability program, and covers a comprehensive list of processes that by design is intended to incorporate energy management in the everyday organizational practice. And you can see a list of those processes or categories of processes down here, from developing the energy policy to the energy planning, procurement, monitoring and measurement and analysis, compliance and conformance, all these things. And this is much more detailed inside the standard itself, which I would, if you have not looked at it already, I would definitely recommend for you to have a look at. So the work processes are not just limited to the, as we said, to the powerhouse engineer. No, the processes are defined for all levels from the top of the organizational pyramid to the bottom. The pyramid that I'm showing on the southeast corner of the screen here, this is as per the World Class Manufacturing, WCM, where it breaks down the facility or the organization into strategic level, systemic level, and situational, depending on the roles and the responsibilities. And we're just using that here as a reference. But the process design, the way you're designing this process, should really align with the organizational design and such roles and responsibilities for the people, and what you expect them to do about energy. For those people, obviously, that touch energy, that deal with energy, and there's a lot of those. It's not only the people in the powerhouse, not only the people on the shop floor, but there's a lot of other staff that's actually dealing with energy, and we'll talk more about that in the presentation. So the process drives, as you can see here, it drives the information flow between those different levels to support the energy management at the three different levels: strategic, systemic, and situational. And ultimately what it does, it results in actions. Effectively, the business process becomes the heart, the engine that feeds on the information, which is delivered in the form of reporting and analytics. So information is a requirement for this kind of model to work. And this kind of takes us to the typical situation that we see a lot in manufacturing. It's either you have a situation of, I don't have enough data, I don't know what's going on, or I actually have too much data, and who has the time to actually sort out and go through this, put the right information in front of the right person at the right time so that you actually get actionable actions out of it. So here's how effective energy systems do that. And so we're going to touch a bit here on energy systems. We're going to go in more detail later on that. I commented that earlier that a lot of levels, a lot of people in the organization touch energy and can make use of the information. You can see a sample of that here. People that are doing scheduling and planning. Energy is definitely an item that should be looked at because there's a cost measure associated with it, and optimizing production schedule has to do with that. Maintenance, engineering, line supervisors, and then all the way up to the C level and the V level where energy contracts are being negotiated, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, again, I like to emphasize that energy is just another ingredient to the process, along with all the other materials and ingredients that you use to make your product. So the systems track energy usage data and add to it production context. And the idea of adding the production context is really to convert the data into information. Collect that and centralize it and make it available for people to access. And then serves this information in different formats, reports, and analytical functions that are specifically suited to each specific role in the organization, and depending on how that role relates to energy. So the reports that the different people will need to see are not all the same way. The information is not presented in the same format. It's depending on that role, really, to result in that in the actions and make it quick. So the service provided by an energy reporting system is then really the enabling. It's the enabler and for that predefined process. So the takeaway here in my mind is configure. If you have an energy system, make sure that system is configured in a way that will enable the process that you've already predefined. If you don't have a process that's predefined, well, then you have a component, a big component that's a cornerstone that's missing, and that needs some work. And for that, that's where the standards would come in and the best practices to give you a framework to develop such processes. So as we discussed, this is an example based on WCM world-class manufacturing terminology, enabling the business process the WCM way through multi-level reporting, which is intended to drive the business processes for energy management. It's about delivering the right information to the right audience at the right time, what you would expect from an energy management system. Again, the different levels of reporting, they are specifically designed and intended to serve the process that's designed for that particular level. Not all the reports look the same. The information is presented in different ways to enable that particular process. At the same time, those reports will present key performance indicators that are tied to these particular roles so that the performance of the people can be measured on their ability to drive the savings in their own capacities depending on their own roles. Okay, so this pretty much concludes the first part of the presentation, which is focusing on the operational side. Now we're going to look at the energy systems in manufacturing. And as a start, you're going to find that energy systems, they come in under different names and acronyms. You'll see Energy Management System as EMS, Energy Information System, EIS. MEMS has also been introduced, Manufacturing Energy Management System, which is really emphasizing that it's not just an energy management system that's generic. A lot of those are intended for facility management institutions and things like that. Manufacturing tends to be a little more intense and requires higher granularity down to the shop floor, as we're going to see later in the presentation. But ultimately, the functionality that's expected from an energy system covers data collection, historical tracking, capturing production context, targeting, in other words, being able to specify targets and being able to measure against those targets. And by the way, some of those targets could be static, some of them could be dynamic, as we're going to see, because they would depend on how much product I'm making, for example, or how much influence we have regarding weather, seasonality, those kind of things. And then ultimately the presentation, the information, and enabling the analytics and slicing and dicing that information. So energy systems have to be configured in a way to represent your plant, to represent the physical plant, the lines, the equipment, the departments, and also to represent the meter maps in the plant. A well-designed system will allow you to break down your facility into multiple levels in standard ways, and we make reference here to the ISA standards, which would, if you see on the right-hand side, there's a breakdown from an enterprise all the way down to a unit level. So an enterprise can contain more than one site, a site can contain more than one area, and so on and so forth, until you get to the production unit. And this is the same model that you use to track materials and activities on the shop floor and to execute manufacturing and run execute against the production schedule. It is the same. All what we're doing is we're saying we want to use the same model to track our energy as well, which means that the flow of energy is tracked from the header that's coming to the site all the way to the different areas in that site, to the different cells or lines, and then all the way down to the equipment level. The key thing is, and we see that when we go to brown fields, green fields, this is less of an issue, but it's the alignment of the meter map and the sub-metering to the plant model. Because if I have a meter that's not lined up with this kind of model, then it would be questionable as if this meter is really giving me data that I can use to drive the behaviors and support the process for energy management. So based on that, you're able to track the consumption at each one of those levels down to the production unit, along with the production activity occurring at that point in the model. So I want to be able to track what was going on that piece of equipment while I was consuming that energy. This is the context that would really make it, turn it into information. By combining all these together and following this kind of modeling scheme that I just presented here, this really enables you to slice and dice the information by equipment type, by process function, and it also enables activity-based costing. For example, capturing how much energy I used for that particular batch or for that production run or for that work order. Systems also provide analytics, and analytics provide really techniques for you to be able to assist in identifying waste and potential energy savings. There are several methods and analytical techniques offered by energy systems. We're listing some of them up here. It's going into each one of those in detail is really, in my mind, beyond our discussion today. We can come back later and talk about that. But you've probably seen and familiar with some of those, and the idea here is that systems help you systematize that and make it easier to actually apply these kind of analysis on the data. The one that's evolving at the moment that you may not have seen is the predictive intelligence, which is the last one on the list down below, and this really is about how can I make the system recognize the patterns automatically and make suggestions as to what is the best way to go from here and identify the anomalies and make suggestions and recommendations for the users to not have to figure that out on their own and do the analytics in a more automatic fashion. So we've mentioned production context in the presentation so far more than once, and so what does that really mean? So here's a few examples. What's the production quantity that I'm making on that piece of equipment or on that line or in that area? Which product was running? Which material lot has been introduced as raw material to the process? A lot of times you're going to find that the energy consumed in the process really depends on which material I started with, because I have to compensate for a number of things and quality factors in such material. Which shift was running, which crew was running, what was my line speed? Was it running on full speed or was it running on low speed for some reason? Equipment status, and so on and so forth. And obviously there's weather factors and what we call process parameters, which is what were the set points used at that particular time. Process engineers will experiment and will change set points on recipes and things like that. That will have direct impact on what you're consuming. Should you know historically what were those set points, you'll be able to establish the relationship between those parameters and the impact on energy consumption, and then hence be able to advise and also make those people aware as to what's going on. Why do I need 110 psi in my compressed air line if the equipment is going to run with 100? That 10 psi differential is actually a lot of money, and a lot of people do not realize how expensive compressed air is. So this is the value of that production context, and what I'm going to try to do here is just quickly go through some examples that will help reinforce some of these things we talked about. So starting with this screen that you see right here, excuse me, this is a sample report that's showing me the breakdown of the usage of compressed air, and the fact that I have three compressors running in that facility most of the time. Not most of the time. There's one that's used the most, the gray, and then the blue, and then the red. If I look at the second half of the screen, it's showing me these bars, which is giving me a percentage of, by day, basically, what's the percentage consumption or production of air that have been dependent on any one of those compressors. So it shows that the gray compressor been utilizing that around 60% of the time every day, and then the blue, and then it looks like the red is kind of like almost the backup, and then there's also the yellow. But what's interesting on this graph is that portion on the left, on the southwest corner right here, which is really showing me my production quantity for that same day. And you can see that, you know, when I had my maximum production on the second day, that second, trying to see the mouse here again, here it is. I've been using 3 compressors. Look at the last day when production was very minimal. I actually had my 4 compressors running. Well, why is that? And has there been some kind of communication, or should have been kind of communication going on between the powerhouse and production? We would have not resulted in this situation. This would require further investigation and presents an opportunity for basically reducing waste. In other words, I did not necessarily have to produce that much or have these compressors running if my production was down low as such. So this is a reflection of bring in the production context. In that particular case, it's the production quantity for the day, along with what I'm doing with my power air compressors in that particular case. This is an example of where you can combine the costs together with the consumption in one report, and that at that level you're typically looking at the plant management level, where you're looking at all of the type of energies that are being consumed, electrical, natural gas, city water, etc., in one screen to see where is my money going. And although electricity is more expensive than natural gas, this pie chart shows us that most of our money is going in natural gas in that particular case. But what's also interesting, if you look at this graph right here, it's again overlaying production on top of consumption for each of the utilities. And you can see that my best performance was in April. And as we transitioned into June, my production is about 1/8 of what it was in April, but it looks like my consumption's only reduced to about half. Well, there could be a number of reasons for that. Maybe that's just my base load, what it is. But it raises the question, and it requires somebody to go in and look at more information, more data, to verify that this is true, and also figure out what can we do about that base load and what is else going on other than my production activity. Does my consumption depend on the product type that I'm making? This is applicable to some industries, not applicable for others. This particular example we're looking at here, it certainly is. We're looking at 3 different types of utilities on the same graph or on the same chart. We have a Pareto chart showing the color coding here is for the different products. You can see that the consumption is dependent on which product I'm running. The top 3 Pareto charts are not as useful as the bottom 3 Pareto charts. The bottom 3 Pareto charts, we have normalized the consumption by kilopound produced. So you can see that this is my compressed air cubic feet per kilopound of product. So what's happening here is that this is really giving us much more useful information by adding that production context right here. It's telling me that this pink product, the first bar, this is where my highest, it's costing me the most in terms of utilities. And then the rest of the products are actually coming in kind of groups. You can see that there's about from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the next 5 bars after the first bar, that's like another group or brand or type of product, and then all the others are much lower in energy consumption. Well, what can I do with this? Well, that would drive further thought about, okay, well, can I influence my production schedule to make sure that if I know that consistently this product is consuming more energy, what kind of energy it is, can I alter my production schedule to make sure that I can drive some savings out of that, depending on which product I have to make and at what time of the day, given that my consumption or my costs at night could be less than my costs during the day. Another example here, if I'm looking at the information, my consumption information in the context of shift and crew. Very interesting situation that we see here. And by the way, these are all examples from real production data. They're not simulated. You can see here that this is a report that's giving us numbers on all of the utilities I'm using in that facility, including nitrogen and other things. If you look on the left-hand side, we have shift 1, shift 2, shift 3. It looks like my day shift, which is shift 1, is consistently performing better on their consumption per kilopound of product produced on all utilities. And at the same time, if you look at that last column right here, our production is actually the most on the day shift. So they are low on energy, they are high in production, they are very efficient, and that's consistent. And you can see here that this is about 1 month worth of data from start to end. So that raises the question, well, what are these guys doing? Does it have to do with the experience of the crew on the day shift? They have more expertise? They're doing something different? We would want to go in and see what the other 2 shifts are doing. And so from here, you should be able to drill down and go and look and investigate further to find those opportunities and drive the improvements. The ability for forecasting combined with a daily or weekly performance review process in the operations meeting, for example, can help identify deviations from budget early on for the proper corrective actions. The view that you're looking at here is basically showing those blue bars. That's my actual consumption every day. And overlaid on top of that, the pink, that's my theoretical forecast, depending on a model that's fitted on the data. So I can forecast and know what's my budget and what should I be working within given the demand on production. So if you look up here between the yellow line and the black line, that's my cumulative, and it's showing, okay, I'm exceeding my budget for that month, for the 30 days period by that much. And if you're looking at that chart every day, you're going to see that progressing accordingly, and you should not be getting in that situation if you're able to correct that. One of the powerful things you can do is with energy, like we do it with other things, other process parameters on the shop floor, to get the engagement with the shop floor people standing beside the machines and operating them, is apply SPC charts to know when you're in control and when you're out of control, because it applies to energy the same it applies to everything else on the shop floor. So it's nothing new. It's just applying the thought of applying SPC to energy. What you see here is a case where we've done that on the shop floor. This is going to result in the operator responding to this, at least getting notified, alarmed, and when a disturbance happened on the process for some reason, in that particular case it's affecting my natural gas and city water consumption, and then he was able to go in and do something about it and bring back the process down in control. That has resulted in savings and this is, we're not looking at data that's old. This is like within the last few minutes. So it's really driving this proactive, near real-time type of activity to drive the savings. In terms of architectural considerations for systems, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but basically this is the kind of stack that you'd expect to see in a system, from the meters all the way up to the reporting. It goes through storage, it goes through databases that would serve the reports. Nowadays, typically you expect the reporting to be enterprise-wide, so people are able to access that database source and get the reporting serviced for everybody on the web. If you are considering an energy system, where do we get started? Typical stuff, you need to survey the facility, basically understand what level of metering you have, what are the major consumers. We're not going to go and meter everything, but we want to focus on the low-hanging fruit and the major consumers. And from a process perspective and organizational perspective, you want to get coordinated and define the energy cost centers that you want to consider for the facility so that you can line up that meter map like we were talking with the energy cost centers. You want to determine the level of infrastructure and automation that's in place. Keep in mind, we got to be thinking about that production context data. We're not only collecting meters, we want to be able to collect some of the production context because that's where the value is going to come in. Define a primary metering phase, perform an energy audit, and that's where you can get a consultant to come in and help you start building a business case with the potential for the savings, and then start implementing a formal energy policy, awareness, training, communication, designing and building that business process that we're talking about. So in summary, what I would like to emphasize is let's make sure we take a holistic and balanced view to energy within manufacturing. Again, talking about that practical sustainability, business, people, process, technology. If we see a lot of people just go for technology and forget about the others because those are the harder pieces, but technology doesn't work by itself. And then address the operational aspects head on. Getting that commitment from senior management, that is a requirement. This is where you start. Creating an energy-aware culture by sensitizing the people to using this information and empowering them with the right tools. And then building the business process for them to follow. Employ the system technology that will enable the process. and leverage the energy analytics. And this is an area that's continuously advancing at the moment to automate a lot of these stats and mathematics things that we can do in Excel and manually, but getting them in a system really helps significantly. Manufacturing energy maturity is a journey, and so manage energy by the facts and by the numbers and try to make it business as usual. And that's what I would like to leave you with. Back to you, Rick. Thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you, Ali. So at this point, if folks have any questions, there's a question box on your control panel, and you can start kicking them in. So Ali, I'm going to fire these off to you and then let you answer them. So here's the first one. With regards to significantly reducing and sustaining energy and water consumption in manufacturing, is there an approach that you found to have the highest impact or the fastest ROI?
Yeah, I mean, you'll notice by now everything we talked about today is really focusing on this, what we call data-driven process changes and best practices for reducing the waste. There's a lot of things you can do to reduce energy, and they will come with a high investment that needs to happen, or medium investment that needs to happen. So if you want to go and look at solar or wind, or that requires a certain amount of investment. That's typically on the high side. We can address the lighting and the insulation issues and things like that, and that's typically low investment and will still result in returns. But what we're trying to focus in here today is shedding the light and giving you the insight on what could be done to just, not with much investment other than have the right metering and sub-metering in place, but then empowering the people to look at the information that's presented and use a process to drive such process changes according to best practices. This is your highest ratio in terms of return on investment, we would think.
Good, good. Here's one that's just come in. What is the typical energy to cost of production ratio you find in industries going this deep into the energy versus production data?
So, I mean, this is, we've seen different rates of success on that because, as I said, it's reliant on how successful you are with getting your energy policies implemented, energy programs implemented. But the typical is I would say somewhere between 8 to 20% year over year. There's a lot of success stories out there, and we can share with you some of those in maybe a later webcast. But there's a lot in the marketplace, and that's an 8%, 10%, 15%. That's the kind of ballpark that you're looking at for such successful implementations of energy programs. And again, it's the four cornerstones are prerequisites for all this.
Good. Here's a specific one. How do you validate the cost of metering?
The cost, does this mean the cost of validate the cost of metering? Not sure exactly understand.
I would assume that we're looking at the cost of installing the required metering to get to these levels of data.
Right, and that's where again, from experience, we've seen customers that dedicate, based on their business case, are able to dedicate significant amount of investment to just go in and put meters everywhere. That's not the recommended approach. The recommended approach is you do phases, waves of metering, and your start is to focus on the main consumers, the ones that are energy hogs, the areas where you feel that the waste levels are high, and focus on those, and you have to start somewhere. So if your facility is going to end up, let's say, with 100 meters or 120 meters, we break them down into waves and say, well, let's go on 3 waves, for example, 3 phases. And this way you're kind of finding, gaining more information and knowledge as you go to influence the next wave and where you're going to put the sub-metering, etc. Definitely you want to be able to go hit the area level. you want to go and hit the line level or the cell. Going down to the unit level is definitely key for those energy hogs, and you want to, so that you can get those under control.
And there, as a follow-up question, if you're trying to implement the ISO 50001 standard, how does that answer change if you're going for that standard in terms of how deep you go with the metering? Is high level, does that get you there, or are you really getting back down all the way down to that production level for the standard?
So the standard is not going to prescribe for you the level of metering, but what the standard is going to recommend you do and provide you the framework for is it's going to tell you, go and look at your facility and break it down in quote-unquote energy cost centers. So it's up to you with your teams to define what that is. And the whole key here is, can I, for every energy cost center, which could be, it could be an area, it could be a cell, it could be down to a unit that, again, it's an energy hog, and you're going to assign a name beside it. And that's the key, is that you're holding somebody accountable to the performance of energy on that, at that particular level. And so that's what's coming from the standard, and then it's going to give you the framework for all the processes that you apply around that. So if you determine you have to go to that level, that's where you have to get your sub-metering going to. If, as I said, in waves, maybe you just go to the cell level if you're unsure, but eventually you're going to have to find those energy hogs, and you have, it has to be, the requirement here has to be aligned to the meter map and to the ultimately the breakdown of your facility into energy cost centers.
Okay, thank you. Here's another one, and this is regarding data mining software. So do you have any experience using certain data mining software to gather data for your dashboards?
Yeah, I mean, there's a multitude of different kind of platforms and technologies out there, and there's I would say too many of them, and they'll come with different strengths and weaknesses, and in today's day and age, expectations from a user are pretty high, because we're all computer literate, we're all on the internet, we access our reports and information on the web. So those tools have significantly been advanced, I would say, over the balance of the past 5 to 7 years, and specifically in energy management, because of the we all know a lot of manufacturers nowadays have to worry about energy. Those manufacturers didn't have to worry about energy 10 years ago. So the requirements for energy management are really making its way into these tools, and we'll see some of these tools that are specifically designed to enable the stuff that we're talking about here today.
Gotcha. And then another question in more of a broad stroke: if continuous process improvement is a significant factor in sustainable manufacturing, how do we motivate the operational excellence and sustainability leaders to better collaborate on corporate and plant initiatives?
That's an excellent question, because this is, without the involvement of operations, we find that it becomes very hard to drive success out of such programs. We need that ownership, we need that involvement, and the assigning of such responsibilities to people that are in operations. So there's a couple of ways, not different ways, but things that are complementary to each other, and that has to have to happen concurrently. So first of all, you got to start with the awareness and the training and the sensitization of such people to the dollars that are being spent and potentially wasted. We have this mentality that we insert a plug in the wall and the equipment operates and the electricity is just there. It's overhead. That's all what it is. But fact of the matter, it's not. Back to what I was mentioning earlier in the presentation. Some of the companies actually went to the extent of putting the numbers in front of shop floor people and supervisors, not just in kilowatt hours and engineering units, but also in dollars. so that they understand that when there is a leak, well, here's what's costing us every hour, every day, until maintenance get to it and actually have the leak fixed. So this whole awareness and sensitization has to happen, and this is done through different forums and mediums. And there's a lot of consulting companies out there that will help with that kind of stuff. If you don't think you can do it on your own, get the help from a consultant. But then in parallel to this, I go back to what I talked about the process and defining the key performance indicators for each one of your people that actually touch energy and consume energy at any one point in time during the day. They're going to be assigned such KPIs, roles and responsibilities, and they'll be held accountable to that. And that's how you close the feedback loop, where you're assigning targets for everybody. Like everything else, it's performance evaluation, and then you measure. So the KPIs will help drive that cycle, and that's how you get your continuous improvement.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Well, that's all the questions that we've had come in thus far. If folks on the line, if you come up with another one that you think of after the fact, feel free to pass that along to me via email, and I can route it over to Ali for a follow-up. Happy to do that. So thanks again to the teams from Advantage Industrial Automation and Integrate for supporting this webcast. Ali, thank you for your time in putting this presentation together. And,
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Oh, yes, thank you. And as always, thanks to the participants in the Industrial EE Network. This is definitely a resource for you guys, and also provided by everybody's active participation. There will be, this webcast was recorded. It will go live on the industrialee.org website, hopefully within the next business day or two as we work through that. So that'll be available to you in case you missed portions of it. And if there's anybody on this line that reached us through an email forward or some other kind of connection that hasn't been a part of the Industrial EE Network to this point, please shoot me a note. My email address, Rick, R-I-C-K, @industrialee.org, and I'd be happy to follow up with you and keep you posted on upcoming meetings and things of that nature as we move forward. So with that, we'll conclude. And again, I thank everybody for their participation, and the guys from Advantage Industrial Automation and Integrate for supporting this. And at this point, that concludes the presentation. Look for some details from me in the near future on upcoming meetings and upcoming webcasts. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you.